realistically, you're looking at a very small percentage going on for finer clothing. So nearly all of the wool, Irish wool, goes to the UK for scouring. I think there used to be in excess of 10 scouring plants in the UK. You're down to 2 now, which are owned by the 2 biggest wool buyers in the UK.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. With shearing season in full swing, we're joined by Pat Coffey, merchant, wool exporter and member of the Irish Grown Wool Council. Pat brings 4-generation experience in the wool industry and gives us a valuable insight into the current state of the wool market, explaining some of the key factors influencing it today. We discuss best practice in shearing and how it can impact wool quality, including the importance of the Shear Success guide that was distributed to farmers with the census last year. Pat walks us through the journey wool takes from farm to market, explaining how it's often blended with fibres from other countries to meet the customer specifications. We wrap up the episode looking at ongoing work in the sector, including a new initiative piloted last year that's delivering higher returns for farmers. For those that don't know you and your involvement in the wool business, would you maybe give me a little bit of background to your business there and how you've been involved in it over the number of years?
Myself and my brother run P Coffey and Sons Limited. We're agricultural merchants based here in Lee Carroll in South County Roscommon. We're the 4th generation in the business. We were always involved in the wool industry from the very first generation. I suppose things were a hell of a lot different then. Back around 92, I think it was 92 or 93, we bought our first press pack and we started exporting directly ourselves.
Pat, it's interesting when you go back over the history, and your family's been involved in this business for an awful long time from the sense of that. But how it's evolved, and you touched on something there, like if we went back to your grandfather's generation and the value of wool was a hell of a lot higher. Obviously, we've seen challenges in that sector in recent years, and that's something we're going to kind of talk a bit more about. Maybe it'll bring it more up to date to us, like what has happened in the wool sector over the last couple of years? What's the kind of big couple of challenges that you're facing?
It's been a hell of a couple of years. You know, we had COVID and everything that brought. It's worth just pointing out that wool is a commodity, and as such, its price level is very sensitive to the economic conditions of the major economies of the world. So if anything affects them, it actually has a bearing on wool. And so we had COVID and we had all the uncertainty and lockdowns and bringing the whole bloody world to a halt that brought. Just when we started to recover from that and things started to improve, we went into the energy crisis and the cost of processing and, everything that brought. The start of this year, there was some green shoots. There was great optimism within the trade that we had finally turned the corner and that we were going to start going places and that prices were going to improve for the primary producer, which is the farmer. And then, well, our friend in America and his tariffs have kind of put paid to that. They've just, created this uncertainty that people are afraid to go too far in one direction, and it's.
I suppose, Patrick, we always have to remember we're competing with mass manufactured man-made textiles the whole time. That's the other thing that's kept evolving over that period of time as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, you go back, as I said, we're 4 generations at it. When you go back that far, what was everyone wearing? They were wearing wool-based clothes. The wool was the big payday of the time. Never mind the lamb. Wool was the Jesus. Even I remember lads coming down here and they'd bring down the wool and they'd clear the account and maybe get a couple of ton of fertilizer and stop for the few pints on the way home. It was a big day out going with the wool. And then we had I suppose the world kind of changed, didn't it?
Yep.
Fast fashion, synthetics, carpet industry suffered. Yourself, you go into a new house now, very few you see with carpets in them. It's all timber floors and tiles. And Irish wool, by its nature, is very adaptable to carpet manufacturing. So we're kind of fully reliant on the commercial sector. So that's cruise ships, hotels, that end of things.
And that really reflects why COVID has such an impact on it. Like, look, Pat, you're in the middle of cheap countryside there. You're seeing it from every angle, so you're right the way through, even through to the exporting part of the business. It's probably a hard sell, and I know you've been involved with Irish Grown Wool Council over the past number of years. And the hard sell in this is how do we go about improving the product we're producing and make it more saleable? Like maybe to take it from that aspect just for a moment, what impact has quality on the exporting of that wool and the potential markets we can sell into?
I suppose firstly we should point out that better quality wool is becoming lesser and lesser every season. There's numerous factors playing into that. The demographic, the age of the farming community, people are cutting back in numbers. Breeding has changed hugely in the last 20, 25 years. It's gone away from the wool and it's all about the lamb now. But, with the Wool Council there, we had a look. I'm involved with the subcommittee dealing with wool quality and wool care and presentation. And we had a meeting with yourself, and it was 20 years. It was over 20 years since anything was produced about how to present your wool, how to, rules to adhere to or try to adhere to when you're shearing. So we just tried to revisit that and try to put a bit of shape on that and get a bit of information out on it again. There's a great old saying that it takes a year to grow a fleece, and a couple of seconds carelessness can ruin it forever.
And I think, Pat, give you your credit, you were actually one of the driving forces behind that work starting again. I remember it was you that brought up that actually the whole information was produced. So look, I suppose the context on that, with a bit of a help for ourselves and a lot of driving force on your side of the house was that flyer on Shear Success was circulated all cheap farmers last year. And I suppose, Pat, like, if we kind of talk about some of the key areas that highlighted in it and what impact that they can have on the quality of the wool we're producing. Like maybe to take that from the start, Pat, if we talk about this time of year, we're in the middle of shearing season, if the weather mends, what are the couple of things that can happen on a farm before shearing that can have an impact on wool quality? Or what do they need to focus on?
Yeah, look, there's just a couple of key things, Kieran. Really, for shearing, the wool needs to be dry. So if that means getting the sheep in beforehand, if you can house them on slats, all the better, rather than having them in on straw or, God forbid, bloody turf mold, which is the bane of a wool man's life if they're in on top of that. Because it's that's just adding contamination and vegetable matter to the wool, which is a disaster. If you can have them fasting for about 4 hours before shearing, just leaves it a little bit easier on the animal and on the shearer. Try to have them dagged. No, it's not easy, but again, when the fleece is being processed, that's just further contamination. If guys, when the shearing is done, if they can just, have a board or a mat just to put the fleece on. We're not asking them to tie it like they used to do years ago, but just roll the fleece, put a bit of a tuck on it. If you have the belly wool, you can include that in the fleece. There's no problem. And then most importantly, if you have coloured sheep or mountain sheep, just leave them to last to avoid colour contamination. Put them in a separate bag, or even if you haven't got a separate bag, just put them in a nut bag. Don't push them in the bag of white wool, because it just ruins the whole thing. When we go then and we're grading the wool and we're trying to sell that wool, if there's grey and black through it, we have to sell it as a lesser grade. It's just devaluing it.
Can I put you over that one a little bit more? Like, so the dagging part, obviously, if they can't do it beforehand, them dags really, Pat, have to be removed when they're shorn. Like that's a basic, and we should be strongly be considering doing.
Absolutely. Look, guys have to do it with the lambs before they're going with them, and unfortunately, it has to be done with the fleece as well. You can't have dags in it. It's a nightmare here trying to rip dags off fleeces.
You talked there a little bit about grading the basic rolling of a fleece, and look, there's varying degrees of how good you can do that, but even at a basic level of rolling it, why is that important when it comes to grading and afterwards? Or how does that make that process easier?
I suppose a lot of people think that we grade, that if a sheep farmer has all the same style of sheep, that the wool is all going to be the same. It's not, and we take every fleece on its own basis, and we judge it on its presentation individually. So you're looking at the strength of the fleece, the color of the fleece, the length of the fibre, the difference between what a younger ewe or a hogget will produce and an older ewe. There's a vast difference. That could be a couple of different grades. The older ewe, the fibre will be a bit weaker, and
it just makes that process that wee bit easier afterwards. Then when you go to try and put that together for selling.
Absolutely, it just speeds it up. So what we do is we buy wool throughout the west of Ireland, throughout Roscommon. We bring it back here to our premises. Every bag on purchase has a number. It's identifiable, it's traceable the whole way through the system. Bag goes up on the table, winch empties it out on the table, and then the fleeces are put into their individual grades. We grade it up then, we grade it, we bale it up with a high density baler, and we're putting out bales 420 kilo average. And then we look to sell that then on markets in 28 ton lots.
Like it's large volume. I suppose if we put this in the context, like you just mentioned, the area South Roscommon, that's a lot of sheep, Pat. So it's a lot of weight of fleece coming in as well.
It's not as much as it used to be, Kieran, to be honest with you. I read a couple of years ago that South Roscommon, say Brideswell, Curraboy, back down to ourselves here and up across the four roads and into East Galway. At one stage, that had the highest density of sheep population in Western Europe. And that is dropping every year. Every year it's getting less and less. The demographic, guys are getting older, sons are coming in, but they're working as well, and the sheep numbers are just getting less and less.
And this is something we probably don't fully grasp. Packaging that coloured fleece separate. Like the big issue with that is it's not suitable for dyeing, but like one coloured fleece in the middle of that bundle could ruin potentially the bundle or its potential market, I take it.
Look, if you have one black fleece in the middle of the bag, unfortunately, the black fleece isn't going to keep to himself, is it? It's no. Little pieces of wool are going to transfer, and that's going to contaminate another fleece. If you're selling a grade of wool as white, then it has to be white. That wool will be when it goes to the user, or sometimes even before it uses here, it's sold subject to testing. And if you have black or grey showing up in that, then if you have it gone, there's going to be penalties. If you haven't it gone, they may refuse it, for the simple reason that you can dye white wool any colour. But if there's grey or black in it, obviously it's limited with its uses. So,
look, it probably brings us to another element of it. What we do with it after we shear, this might seem basic, but I'm thinking here even in terms of storage of it, how quick that should be transported to the merchant and what impact that can have. And even you mentioned here about packs and labelling. Talk to me a little bit about that, like the storage of wool and how soon it needs to go for scouring afterwards.
Yeah, well, look, ideally, it could nearly be got rid of. You often get guys coming in October, November time of the year, and they're shaking their heads. They're coming with the wool, and I put it in the shed and I forgot all about it. And look, that can happen. Any of us, we're all busy this time of the year. There's plenty going on. There's other jobs to be done. If you can get rid of it straight away, brilliant. If you do have to store it, if you can put it on pallets and throw a cover over it, lads will go, but sure, it was in a bag and it was sitting on concrete, and yeah, wool is an absorbent. It will draw wool to it. If it's left on slats, it will actually draw. It'll draw moisture into it. So if you can keep it on pallets and keep it covered, all the better. It'll stop it discolouring. It'll stop you getting that yellow tinge in it, which is going to devalue it further. Yeah, the quicker you get rid of it, the better. I know that's not always possible in different parts of the country, and I appreciate that. I suppose the other thing is packs. All the merchants do our best to get, packs around the country as best we can, and to our different collection points. Where we have big problems is with the polypropylene bags, the fertilizer power packs. Very handy for guys. They always have some of them knocking around the place, and they'll shove the wool into it. That fibre splits. So if you cut that bag to take the wool out, you have to be very careful how you do it, because you're going to end up with polypropylene all through the wool. That will stick in the wool when it goes through the scouring process, and it can be a disaster if it's going for dyeing or going for further processing, which it will be.
So that's a wee bit like the coloured fleece or standard 1 ton meal bags. Just need to have a wee bit of care around them then too if we are using them for storage.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So the 1 ton meal bag is fine. It's a lot stronger. It's primarily the fertilizer bags, and I know. You know what I mean? Guys are busy and the shearers show up and frigate, I have no wool bags, but I have these. And I know it can be difficult, but just a little bit of planning, it can make the world a difference,
It's a day that needs a bit of prep.
What we're just trying to do is we're just trying to improve the presentation and the quality of wool. And, a rising tide floats all boats,
That look, it kind of brings us to where the latter part of this. You mentioned earlier about your packaging up in bales, 400 odd kilos. It's going out in 28-ton loads. Pat, where do you sell that wool to? And again, this comes back a little bit to quality. Like, what's the potential in that market?
You're constantly exploring it, probing, looking for new markets, carpets, and to a lesser extent bedding for some of the finer stuff are the staples for Irish wool. You're looking at a very small percentage going on for finer clothing. So nearly all of the Irish wool goes to the UK for scouring. I think there used to be in excess of 10 scouring plants in the UK. You're down to 2 now, which are owned by the 2 biggest wool buyers in the UK. So the wool will go for scouring. Quite often what the processors will do is they'll be blending multiple grades of wool together. So that blend will be specific to the requirements of who they're selling the wool to, what kind of carpet it's going for, whether it's going for colour and whether it's going for. So, it could be 40% white Irish crossbred. Then there could be wool from the Middle East. There could be wool from Eastern Europe. They'll blend it together with different kinds of wool specific to the requirements and what their client needs. That'll give them the texture, the consistency, the durability for the end product.
And like, look, we say it all goes to the UK for scouring essentially from here. I suppose we need to put in context, like that UK market is also taking in wool from Falklands, it's taking in wool from everywhere as well. It needs to be kind of at that capacity.
Yeah, if you're ever fortunate enough, both scouring plants were in Bradford, and there's basically a satellite system of warehouses around Bradford that your wool will be delivered into, because the scouring plants can't take it all in one go. So what they're running batches, they'll let the warehouses know what they require, and that'll be delivered the day before or that. But when you take a walk around these warehouses, it's like going around the world. You have wool from the Falklands, Chile, your New Zealand and Australia, and of course, Eastern Europe. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating if you see a bit of wool sticking out of a bale. The different qualities that possesses. It's very interesting.
It struck me there when you mentioned about the different blends, and it could be from anywhere. The world becomes a very small place when you enter a business like that. Look, I suppose, Pat, when we started with this, we talked about the difficulties in the market at the moment. And one of the challenges always would be where there's a low price return for farmers. It's hard maybe to put the effort in, maybe, or implement all these changes. But there is a potential there, Pat, even at the moment, for producers who are doing it really well to get a higher return. Look, there is the bigger industry thing that we need to look at the longer term sustainability of it. But for individual producers, even at the moment, Pat, there is potential there to get a higher return for what you're harvesting.
Yeah. And, with our work with the Wool Council and the different studies that are being conducted, there was a bit of work done last year as regards traceability on lamb's wool, and hopefully that'll be extended again this year. It was just done with one merchant in the east of the country, and hopefully that's going to be extended again this year. There's plenty of work going on, behind the scenes. There's studies going on, UCC, the Revere study, the Wool Hub at NTU. There's plenty of work going on there. But I suppose our subgroup, we can understand why the farmers are so frustrated, and why when it comes to shearing, just get it off and flip it to heck, But as I said, if we can just improve the quality and presentation, this will turn. Sheep numbers globally are getting less and less. Wool as a renewable resource is gaining more attention. People are becoming more aware of the circular economy and the detriment of fast fashion has on pollution and all this kind of stuff. So we just need to kind of stick at it and keep our eye on it. And
I think I'm stealing this comment from somebody else talking about the sector, but basically the ship has turned and is still in the right direction again. And look, it might be slow to get going, Pat, but all these little changes will certainly help it. Absolutely.
If we can just create it, that these things become a habit, if they can be done a couple of times, the habit becomes, that's just the way you're trying to do it. And yes, exactly, it becomes practice. And if we can improve the overall quality, that will in turn improve the overall price.
Pat, look, it was great having you on. I think you're doing some good work with the Irish Grown Wool Council, and it's great to see that ongoing. Great getting a bit of an insight into the business. Well, look, really appreciate you coming on with me tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. I have included a link in the show notes to the Irish Scrum World Council's webpage where you can download a copy of the Shear Success Guide and see some of the video clips that was produced showing how to improve best practice around shearing and the impact it can have. That's it for me. For updates on the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more episodes.